Isabel Reyes arrived at the Vidal estate on a quiet gray morning, carrying a frayed canvas bag and a modest letter of recommendation from the cleaning agency. She expected nothing more than a job. Sweeping, scrubbing, staying invisible, and getting paid on time. The tall wrought iron gate creaked open slowly, as if uncertain about letting her in. Beyond it, a winding stone path cut through neatly trimmed hedges and lifeless rose bushes. Everything was immaculate, yet something felt wilted. The gatekeeper barely glanced up. "Back entrance. You're Reyes, right? Mrs. Lusa? The head housekeeper is expecting you." The service door opened before Isabel could knock. A stern older woman scanned her from head to toe, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Not late. Good. Punctuality's rule number 1 here." Isabel nodded. "Understood." "And the most important rule," Lucia added as they stepped into a hallway heavy with silence, "is to avoid interacting with the young master unless absolutely necessary." Isabel hesitated for a beat. She had heard of the child, whispers only. No one spoke in detail, only that he hadn't uttered a word in 3 years, not since his mother passed. "You are here to clean. Nothing more." The words weren't meant to intimidate, but they stirred something in her, a quiet tug beneath her ribs, as if the house needed more than mopping. It needed mending. She tightened her grip on the bag strap. It was time to begin. The boy appeared like a shadow, silent, sudden. Isabel was dusting along the east corridor when she heard soft footsteps dart past, swift as wind. She turned just in time to catch a small figure dashing beyond the staircase, followed by a distant voice from Lucia. "Luca!" Isabel didn't chase him. Instead, she gently set down her cloth and walked toward the hallway where he had vanished. The corridor opened into a muted sunroom, its tall glass panes overlooking the back garden. There, the boy stood with his back turned, shoulders trembling ever so slightly. Isabel didn't speak. She wasn't sure she was even allowed to be there, let alone speak. But something in her heart whispered, "Sometimes presence is enough." She knelt on the floor, didn't call, didn't move closer, just stayed. 1 minute passed, then another. Eventually, Luca turned. His eyes were vast and deep, like galaxies trapped in silence. He looked at Isabel, not fearful, not curious, just looking. Isabel offered a small smile, her voice low and calm. "Hello? You're Luca, right?" "I'm Isabel." No response, but he didn't run. She didn't wait for words. She kept sitting, speaking, as if to a soft breeze. "That tree out there looks like it's asleep, but I think it's just waiting for the sun." Luca sat down, not next to her, but near enough, still silent, as if he didn't want to disturb something fragile that had just begun forming between them. A few more minutes passed like that, no sounds, only the kind of quiet that heals. Then Lucia appeared at the far end of the hallway, her expression tight with tension. "Miss Reyes?" she called. Isabel stood slowly, her gaze still fixed on Luca. Before she left, she spoke softly, just loud enough for him to hear. "You don't have to say anything, Luca. Sometimes just listening is enough." The following days passed quietly, but within that stillness, something began to shift, like an underground current moving beneath a glassy lake. Isabel never looked for Luca, but each time she was in the east corridor or near the back veranda, he would be somewhere nearby. Not too close, never too far, like a wild bird perched on a high branch, watching to see if she posed any danger. She went about her tasks as usual, cleaning windows, dusting bookshelves, polishing the marble stairs, but always humming softly, not to draw attention, simply because it brought her peace. The melodies were old lullabies, wordless tunes she remembered from childhood. And Luca listened. She knew he did. One morning, as Isabel tidied the library, she heard faint footsteps behind her. She didn't turn, only said gently, "The butterflies in the garden have started to bloom. I saw a yellow one this morning resting on the lavender. Its wings looked like sunlight. There was no response. But when she glanced over her shoulder, Luca was seated on the couch, clutching a book nearly as big as he was. He didn't look at her, but he was there, listening. Daniel Vidal watched from his office through the security monitors. The same screens that once showed nothing but silence and emptiness now flickered with Isabel's quiet presence. He saw the shift in his son, how Luca's eyes no longer seemed lost, how his posture softened. He saw his son listening, and, slowly, he found himself listening too. Small changes emerged, like spring buds. Luca began eating more when Isabel was nearby. He left small drawings on side tables, a clumsy cat, a butterfly, a flower pot. Then one morning as Isabel finished in the kitchen, she found a tiny toy car placed near the bench where she took her midday rest. A silent thank you. No one said a word. But something had formed, a bond as light as breath, yet real enough to stir an entire house that had long been frozen in grief. The storm didn't come from the sky, it came from a fallen photograph. That afternoon, Isabel was wiping down the second-floor hallway when a sharp crash echoed from Luca's room. Glass. Then, silence. A silence too heavy, too still, as if the whole house had stopped breathing. She ran toward the sound, heart pounding. The door stood ajar. Inside, a shattered frame lay in pieces, glass scattered like ice, and at the center of it all was Luca, curled up, fists pressed to his temples, slamming his head against the wall as though trying to silence something tearing him apart. Isabel froze. "Luca," she whispered, but he didn't hear her. She stepped in. Slowly, gently, as if approaching a wounded creature. No one stopped her. No one dared. Lucia and another maid stood frozen at the threshold, horrified. Daniel had rushed from the stairs but halted when he saw Isabel lower herself to the floor, just an arm's reach away from the boy. She didn't touch him, didn't command, didn't soothe. Instead, she spoke, in the same voice Luca had grown used to, the same tone she'd used to talk about flowers, butterflies, and the sun. "The butterflies in the garden are almost ready, remember? The little caterpillars we saw. Soon they'll have wings." Luca kept hitting his head, but slower now. "You know," she continued, her voice like wind, "your mother had such a beautiful smile. Your eyes, they look just like hers, especially when you look at flowers." The movement ceased. Luca trembled. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, and then, like a dam breaking, he collapsed into her arms, sobbing silently. Isabel held him, said nothing, offered no logic, no fear of mess. Blood, tears, and grief melted into her embrace, the only place in the world that felt safe. Daniel stood behind them, eyes burning, fists clenched so tight his knuckles whitened. Years of therapists, of science, of treatment plans. And then a woman, hired only to clean, had done what none of them could. In Isabel's arms, Luca softened. He still trembled, but he no longer struck. And when that small hand clutched her shirt, there was no mistaking it. The storm had passed, and someone had become his shelter. That morning's breakfast began like every other, quiet, routine, and a little stiff. Isabel no longer stood at a distance. Since the incident, Daniel had asked her to join them. As part of a new rhythm, he said. She hesitated, but Luca had gently pulled her hand toward the chair beside him. No words, just a look, a nod. On the table, the toast had been cut into playful shapes, Isabel's doing, unasked. One piece resembled a crescent moon, another a star. "Like the one we saw outside the window last night," she whispered. Luca picked up the moon-shaped slice. His fingers trembled slightly. Daniel quietly folded his newspaper. The room filled with a silence so tense it almost shimmered, not fearful, but breathless, waiting. Then, like a dream released from somewhere deep, Luca opened his mouth. "Mommy." The cup in Isabel's hand slipped. Both Daniel and Lucia froze. No one moved. The boy looked directly at Isabel. His lips quivered, his gaze steady. "Mama," he repeated, this time louder, clearer, as if the syllables had lived within him for years, just waiting to be named. Isabel rose quickly, stepping back, her heart pounding. No, Luca, she choked, glancing at Daniel as if begging for help. You don't have to call me that. I'm just... But Luca had already climbed down from his chair. He ran to her, small arms wrapping tightly around her waist. Mommy, he whispered into the fabric of her blouse, again and again, each time a little surer, a little softer, a little more like love. Daniel stood slowly. His expression wasn't surprise, it was something deeper. Recognition. No one said anything else. They didn't need to. One word, spoken not from pressure, not from prompting, but from a child's heart that had finally found a name for love. The news spread like fire on wind. The Vidal boy, the child who hadn't spoken in 3 years, had uttered a single word, Mama, and with it, the undercurrent began to stir. The next morning, Camila Vidal, Daniel's younger sister, arrived unannounced. Her heels struck the marble like warning bells, her voice sharp as glass. Where is she, the woman who's convinced my nephew she's his mother? Isabel was arranging flowers in the foyer. Her hands froze, the roses trembled. Daniel emerged from the staircase, his gaze cold as steel. Camila, must you bring a storm into the morning? This isn't a storm, she sneered, eyes locked on Isabel. It's clarity. A housemaid? Daniel, really? But the reply didn't come from Daniel. It came from the hallway. Mommy, Luca appeared, small feet pattering toward Isabel, wrapping his arms around her waist like the world was falling apart. Camila fell silent. No one moved. Luca looked up, at Isabel, then at his father. And then he turned to the stranger. This is my mommy, he said softly, each word slicing through the layers of expectation that cloaked the estate. The silence that followed Luca's declaration lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough to shift the air in the entire estate. Camila lowered her gaze. She said nothing more. No one needed to convince her. A child's reclaimed voice weighed more than any argument ever could. Daniel stepped forward, standing beside Isabel. His hand rested gently on her back, a wordless affirmation. Family, he said, voice hoarse but steady, isn't always something you're born into. Sometimes it's something you find. Luca looked up at the two of them, a smile blooming. Not the smile of a boy who'd won something, but of one who'd finally found where he belonged. Night fell softly over the Vidal estate, like a thin blanket covering wounds not yet fully healed. Isabel stood alone in the back garden. The lavender bushes swayed gently under the pale moonlight. A breeze whispered through her sleeves, sharp and cold, but she didn't move. She needed the stillness, needed to breathe again after days of quiet battles with unnamed emotions. Footsteps approached behind her. Daniel said nothing at first. He simply draped a long coat over her shoulders. His hand brushed gently across her back, warm and present in a way she hadn't known she craved. You'll catch a chill, he murmured, his gaze fixed on the same sleeping flowers as hers. Isabel offered a faint smile. I'm used to it. I used to have just one coat for an entire winter. Silence stretched between them until he finally spoke. I thought I'd never feel anything again after Elena died. Every day became a performance, being a father, a businessman, a strong man. When inside, I felt completely hollow. Isabel turned to him, her eyes carrying a softness deeper than any words. I understand, she replied. I lost my mother when I was 6, my father not long after. Grew up in a home where being strong was a survival skill. But some nights, all I ever wanted was someone I could lean on, just once. Daniel nodded. He didn't ask more. He didn't pity. He just stood beside her, sharing air and pain, without explanation. Then, soft footsteps pattered across the stone behind them. Luca, Isabel breathed. The boy ran to them, throwing his arms around both. burying his face between them as if that spot was the safest place in the world. No one said a word. Isabel knelt, arms wrapping around him. Daniel sat beside them, placing one hand on Luca's back and the other reaching gently for Isabel's. In that moment, in the hush of moonlight and lavender, there were no titles, no past. Only three people, three heights, healing each other simply by being. They stayed in the garden a while longer after Luca wrapped his arms around them. The wind was still cool, but inside that embrace, none of them felt alone anymore. Isabel looked down at the soft crown of Luca's head, her fingers gently combing through his hair. A quiet thought bloomed within her. Maybe she hadn't come to this house to clean floors, but to find a part of her heart she thought had long gone silent. Daniel watched them both, as if witnessing a miracle. No more pain, no more haunting silence, just a boy relearning how to live, and a woman who never tried to replace anyone, only loved at the right time in the right way. And then, as if his small heart recognized the peace around him, Luca looked up. "I love you, Mama," he said, clear, certain. Isabel froze. It was the first complete sentence he had spoken since Elena's passing. She pulled him into her arms tighter, tears falling like a soft spring rain down her cheeks. "I love you too, Luca," she whispered, her voice breaking. "So very much." Daniel rested a hand on her shoulder. "And I love both of you," he added. Not loud, but enough for their whole world in that little garden to hear. No one corrected the boy. No one questioned where the words came from, because they all knew that voice wasn't born of therapy or instruction. It was born of love. A love that never demanded, never forced, just stayed, waited, and grew. In the stillness of the night, in a place once filled with sorrow, now echoed a small voice, gentle but radiant. A voice born from stillness, nurtured by patience, and released through love. A voice born of love. Not all families are born, some are found, and sometimes love doesn't knock. It simply stays long enough to be chosen.